Hi, I'm Shane Kastorfen from Scale Up Consulting, and here's a short video on how to think about your rate of growth as a company and as a scale up compared to the rate of growth of your people. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight one of the most major pitfalls in the hope that people can think about it early in the sort of start of their scale up career, but also build a continuing dialogue with their employees so that everybody understands what's going on. So here it is for you. Okay, you have a business, let's call it Startup Co, and your CMO, somebody joined your company as Chief Marketing Officer, and he has a budget of, or she has a budget of £5 million. Okay, that's perfectly okay. And maybe it's taken them some time to get to this point in their career, maybe like 15 years to now be CMO of your Startup Co with a £5 million budget. Now, as things grow, and maybe another 5 years later of a kind of mid-co size business, still CMO, maybe a new business, new logo, mid-co, and £10 million budget, right? Okay, taking longer, build out a team. Maybe you've gone from managing 4 people to managing 10, 12 people, something like that. Okay, a bigger, more complicated business. And then another 5 years, and this individual decides they're going to move to big co, right? A super big business. And yeah, CMO is probably a bit too far in 5 years, but they're director of paid marketing with a £50 million budget and a team of 50 people. Okay. So you can see here, this is pretty normal. This is the sort of thing you'd expect to see on LinkedIn. The logos change, people's career develops, it moves, it changes from CMO to director of a bigger company. No problem, right? Absolutely not a problem at all. Okay, now let's look at it this way. Okay, you've got Scale Up Co starting here at 5 million, but this is a scale up rather than a sort of slower growing startup. Okay, so it's ramping really, really quickly. And so again, you go 5 million to 10 million, and you're CMO of this business and CMO of this business, and then you kind of go again, and the same sort of thing happens. Based on what I've just shown you, this makes complete sense. It's understandable, these things happen, people have got to develop really fast, it gets more complicated. But when you do this, you then have a problem because people's egos particularly struggle, and actually the way that people interpret LinkedIn really struggles because the logo hasn't changed. So the big difference between a scale up and a normal career progression is the logo doesn't change, and therefore this looks like a demotion. You know, on LinkedIn, this looks like this person has been demoted. Now, what a lot of people say is they say, don't worry, what I will do is I will make sure that I stay up that curve and that I'm top of that big triangle with the whatever it might be, the huge budget on it, whatever it might be. Okay, but let's just look at that. Okay, so you start here, and in the scale up, unlike what I talked about in terms of normal career progression, is you're growing incredibly quickly. Here I'm saying, can you double your ability in 24 months? But the reality is it's more than double, right? If you double in size, the complexity way more than doubles because you've got tiers and lines, and suddenly you can't manage strategy in just a room, and you've got communication to think about, and you've got leadership and all kinds of stuff. So it's way more than doubling. And remember, it's taken 15 years to get to this point, to be top of the first triangle. And now suddenly you've got to be top of the second triangle in 2 months. And then let's say that then doubles again, right? Or even it's a 10x from the 5 to the 50 million, okay? The complexity is way more than the 10x I've written here, but in another 2 years, you've gone to 50. So can you actually, therefore, times 10 your ability in 4 years' time? And some will say they can, and some will say they, some will accept they probably can't. And this is super, super hard to deal with, which means that most people even struggle just to keep advancing into a lower level, and then you bring in somebody more senior. Now, aside from the LinkedIn challenge, this is the best thing for this individual, because whilst they're top of the pyramid or senior, they're having to teach themselves on first principles how to become top of the triangle. Whereas here, they are learning off somebody who's probably done it quite a lot before. And therefore, from a career development point of view, this is exactly the thing to do, albeit it's really, really hard to do because you're continuing to learn, the triangles are going up the way, and you're going to start learning off a new CMO in this case who's been there and done it before, and she may have a whole raft more experience that you can learn off on a daily basis, setting you up to be the next great CMO, but just in a few more years. So assuming your ability to learn is exactly the same as the growth of a business is an incredibly naive thing to do, but incredibly understandable thing to do. So what would I say is the first thing is draw these triangles for every person who joins your business on the day in, on day one, on the day they arrive. Okay. Part of the onboarding process should be, we are a scale up. This is what happens to people. Let me draw you these triangles and explain it. Most of those people will then say, well, I'm not going to let that happen to me mentally in their head, and they'll fight super hard to deal with it. And that's where it's really important to have the competencies so they know what is expected of them in the various roles changing over time. You know, if the competencies don't move in advance and you haven't changed it for that CMO of a £5 million budget to the CMO of a £50 million budget, then how are they going to know whether they're succeeding or failing and what's expected of them? So you have to keep that advancing. And the other thing that's really, really important is saying, hey, look, we will provide you with the tools to have your best crack at making sure you can keep up with your role. It's a self-serve platform, but it's down to you now to make sure you're part of whatever it might be, book clubs, learning, L&D platforms, your invested courses, because we're not going to force you to have to keep up with your role, because we know we're a scale up and that is near on impossible for some people to do, and that they just have a time to go on. But we're going to have all the tools there and support that you might need, because some of the people who can make this journey can benefit from it, and other people will keep learning at a hell of a rate. They may not just learn fast enough. So I would persuade you to keep drawing triangles on boards, explaining this concept to people, encouraging them to keep up with their role as best they can and to invest in their own L&D, but also to come to terms internally with what might this look like further down if I can't keep up, and am I okay with that? And it's the ego problem. And my experience is around about 50% of people can get their heads around this, and about 50% of people will leave your business when they realize that effectively their title is going to come down. And one last thing to say on title is the ability to move to add a comma is incredibly powerful. So it's difficult when you have a C level, but if you took that again, if you took that example, rather than going CMO, if you said director of marketing, went to director of marketing, went to director of marketing, comma, paid, that's okay. And the use of a comma is incredibly useful in this space, because on LinkedIn it still just says director of marketing, right? Even though now a CMO's come in. So have a think about this, understand it, get your head around it, and then think about how it applies to your business. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed that.